Hello.
Hello. Hello.
Can you hear me okay?
Yeah. Yeah. So you're American, right?
Yes, I was going to mention that.
Okay.
I'm in London, but I am American. So
Okay. That's I posted this to
yeah,
the Facebook. That's why I meant traitor to your country. You're.
yeah,
So I was like, it's just a little joke, but
it's all good. So yeah, I'm kind of interested to see how you want to set this up and what you want to measure the greatest country on earth.
well, I think the U.S. is actually the greatest country in just about every way. I've been to several other countries. First, the U.S. is large, so it's got a enormous variety um, and diversity, which I don't necessarily think diversity is a always a good thing. It's not. It doesn't make it doesn't make us stronger. Just go to high school in a very diverse high school. It's not a good experience for most of the people, but it does provide you with a lot of different experiences, and you can kind of travel around the country. And the country is so big, and that you'll have different experiences. Whether like I'm in the Northwest, which is and then if you go to like California is very different. The South, I actually really like the South. This is Mobile, Alabama. Well, I mean, I got this in Mobile, but Auburn. So the South's very nice. You don't like that, you can go north to New York City, or just all over. So I think there's a lot of diversity. You can find what you like, whatever you want. Um, I would say that the key that makes America great is the freedom, right? So I think America is free, much freer than any other country on earth in terms of political speech, religious freedom, even in many ways medical freedom, as far as what you want to do with your own body. Although there are a lot of restrictions by the government, FDA, things like that. But we've got roads. So I think driving is freedom that you don't have in a lot of other countries, or is restricted in some countries by government taxes, right? So to drive, you go buy your car, you pay a few dollars. Well, now in Seattle, you pay a lot of money, but that's because they're communists in Seattle. So it's not free in Seattle. But, and yeah, so I just think there's a lot of different ways that America is great. College football starts today. So go Cougs, go Ducks. And I don't know, do you watch
I
football?
I don't really watch sports. So if you in any way to challenge, make an assertion that the U.S. is the best as a sport, you have all the expertise there. I have no idea.
That's just one small aspect.
Okay.
American football, eh? American football. Variety, choice, incomes. We have the highest per capita income and the ability to spend it on things what you want for the most part. So, yeah, any of those.
Okay. I'll probably try and get to them all. I guess I'll start with freedom. I think that's one of the biggest freedom in the United States. Well,
Liberty.
yeah, liberty, freedom. I guess. I mean, we don't. I think we understand that we're not defining freedom as do whatever you want, because obviously that's not the case anywhere. It's more a matter of there's a certain range of behavior that we permit in the United States that may not be permissible somewhere else. I think, for the sake of this debate, your burden has to be a little bit of why our range of behaviors that we permit is uniquely better than that of every other country in the world, especially because there is kind of an annual report that kind of is published every year that releases the freedom rates kind of around the world. And the United States, first of all, is not the only free country, obviously, and second of all, it's not actually even in the top or let me just pull up the actual numbers.
What is the report? Because I think I know what you're talking about.
This Freedom House report that what they do is they measure civil liberties. Hold on, let me pull up exactly the criteria.
I know economic freedom, we're not the highest in economic freedom either.
Right.
We're falling. We were at one time.
Yeah, social mobility is falling. That's true. Which kind of...
Oh, well, yeah. Well, we still do have, I think, the highest social mobility. But as far as economic freedom, that they take a bunch of different things like government corruption and taxes and stuff like that, and they bundle it together and rank it. But
yeah. So the one that I'm talking about here, what they do is they measure kind of on two scales: political rights and civil liberties. And in both, well, I mean, we're still ranked, like the highest ranking is 1, and we are ranked as 1. Not, I mean, there's several countries ranked as 1. If you get what I mean, it's not 1 overall. Overall, our score is 89, and I mean, just look at Canada, and they have, you know, a higher score than us. So, they have 99. The UK has 95. Like, if you just look based on a pure numbers level, we're not the most free country technically. If you're measuring it, you know, kind of in the way that there's sort of a consensus to measure it, and not going by kind of pure subjective opinion. So I don't know if you want to keep going there, or do you want me to kind of go through all of them?
yeah, so I looked it up, and I know you don't have freedom of speech in Canada. You don't have freedom of speech in Great Britain because you have hate speech laws. Of course, hate speech laws are just subjective to, you know, what is hate speech. If you don't protect hate speech, you're not protecting speech at all. And I saw that somebody was arrested for smuggling hate speech into Great Britain. You had the pastor arrested for reading a Bible verse in Canada, and it spent like $10 million, and the folks on the family helped him out to fight the case, and he did eventually win, but just the fact that he had to fight those cases. So there really is no freedom of speech in Canada or Great Britain, and you know, the US is starting to lose it, but it's still here. So you can still speak out, you can still go on to any street. You don't have to go to a small corner in Hyde Park. Is it Hyde Park, I think?
Yeah, Hyde Park.
Yeah, so I've been there. I've seen it. You don't have to go to a small corner in Hyde Park to say things. And by the way, you know, even in that corner, you can't speak against the Queen, right? And you can't incite violence or something.
I mean, I'm not entirely sure what the laws are here exactly, but
it's like 3 things you can't do. Like, I don't know what they are. But you can't speak against your queen. So.
Okay. So if
versus what they do, you know, Donald Trump gets it every day, every hour, every minute. they're screaming and.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I think being able to criticize your government and all that stuff, that's a bit important. And in terms, so if we're talking about freedom of speech making the United States the most free, or like, is that what you're arguing makes it the most free? I guess is my question.
Well, in terms of freedom, and yes, when we say liberty, we don't mean like pure libertarian freedom that you have the freedom to do whatever you want. I don't know if you watched the debate with Chaz and another guy. I forget, Siegfried maybe, is somebody. I forget who the other guy was. But it was an Australian. It was basically the same debate title. America is the greatest country on earth or something.
Okay.
It was a tournament debate. So anyways, it was Chaz lives in South Korea, and he was opposed to it. But one of his arguments was that you could go urinate in public. And that's to me, that's not freedom, right? Because you're imposing you're imposing yourself on others by doing that. You know, can I go urinate on your house? And if I can't, I don't see, like, I'm restricted in my liberties if I can't open up my pants in front of your kids or something like that, right? This is ridiculous, because That's not liberty. Liberty is the freedom and
Sorry.
defined as, and I tend to agree with that.
Yeah, sorry, you cut out a little bit. Can you tell me again what it was you consider liberty to be?
Liberty is the ability to do that which is right. So not like pure libertarian freedom that you can just go out and do whatever you want, right? Hurt somebody. Well, I don't see that as being true liberty. I think liberty is the ability to do that which is right or that which should be done.
Okay. I mean,
and I understand that's subjective, but
yeah. So, okay, I kind of want to come back then to your point of freedom of speech. The fact that we have more freedom of speech, like Canada and UK outlaw hate speech. I think in order to win the argument that, our freedom of speech makes us the most free, and that's the absolute best thing, like compared to all other countries, I think you need to win that first, outlawing hate speech is uniquely, I guess you would have to win that. It's uniquely bad, because especially that's kind of the debate that's going on here, and whether or not, hold on, I'm trying to gather my thoughts a little bit. Because if it's true that, or if we want to evaluate that they're less free because they don't have hate speech, because they don't have hate speech, we have to prove that, that harms kind of society as a whole more so than in the United States, where we don't have that limitation. Plus, if other countries have freedom of speech the way we do, then that also kind of puts the burden back on you, like what makes our freedom of speech better than other countries that have freedom of speech, which there are, right? So other countries that haven't banned freedom of speech, hate speech.
It's a combination of all things, but I think the United States has you have a constitutional right to freedom of speech, right? And freedom of assembly. You can get together, you can protest, you can do all kinds of things. But yes, hate speech is a really 1984 thought crime. You've probably read that book, right?
Sorry, I cut out.
It's 1984. You're familiar?
Oh yeah, I am familiar.
George Orwell. He was one of your. Yeah, he was British, right? So, hate speech is thought crime, though, because if you can't say something, basically, what other kind of speech is there that needs to be protected? You don't need to protect love speech. You don't need to protect, speech that nobody cares about. Hate speech is the only kind of speech that needs to be protected. And hate speech, yes, it might be cruel at times, but so what? It's it's just speech, and it needs to be protected. You should have the right to say what you want to say, whatever you believe, basically. And because speaking is just the outcome of your thoughts, so if we're going to outlaw speech, then what we're really doing is we're trying to control thought. And admittedly, they say that that's often what they're doing.
Mm-hmm.
Is that you?
So sorry. Hold on, guys. Can you go outside real quick? Thanks. Sorry about that.
Ugh, kids, they ruin everything. No,
sorry, you were saying?
Oh, just that again. Hate speech laws are actually thought crime laws because speech is just the outcome of what you think, and if we control your speech, do is control what you think, and so they're trying to make you, reduce the amount of so-called hate that you have for various special groups of people, and really, it's always, you can. Richard Dawkins has been very anti-religious. He's very anti-Christian. He's also anti-Islam, but nobody cares when he's anti-Christian, right? I mean, he can go out and he can blast Christian and nobody cares. But then he goes and he says something about Islam and they call it hate speech and it's from the university, which just happened recently. So I think you at least see a consistent idea of hate speech being only if you speak out against some minority group. But what they're really trying to do is trying to guide people's thoughts against a different group.
Okay.
To control people's behavior. So.
Okay. So then the so but if we are just looking at speech then, and then I want to also kind of bring it back to the point of again, compared to other countries who also don't ban hate speech, what makes the freedom of our speech so much greater than all other countries, right? Because if you can't prove that, then again, it's sort of the vote goes negation, you know. And I don't know if you want to kind of touch on these other topics of diversity and income, but
yeah. So
just in terms of diversity, again, we're actually ranked 85th, middle range at best in terms of diversity. There are countries far more diverse than ours. Not that we're not diverse, we are. And again, I think a lot of what we're going to find in terms of just analysis and like results and statistics found about the US is that we're good and great at a lot of things, but certainly not the best, and not enough to warrant saying that we're the greatest in the country. Like in general, and then if you like look individually one by one, you'll see that we fall short a lot. So again, kind of shifting that burden back on you.
So I think the US is the most diverse country. I don't see how you could possibly put us at halfway down the list, because we have a million legal immigrants every year from different countries all around the world, right? So we're letting in, and you just go to any corner, you look around, you're going to see people from 5, 6, 7 different countries. You go to most other countries, you know, I've been to China, right? And I was the Westerner in China. Was an American parasite, an American in China, right? I was that guy, that one guy. So Asian countries, Japan is like 99.99% Japanese. You go to China and it's like 99.9999% Chinese. Even the tourists are all Chinese. Nobody speaks English there, right? That has changed. So.
Yeah. No. And that's absolutely true. And again, I'm just looking at kind of facts and statistics here. So Pew Research, again, they publish these statistics as well, and your experience can probably be explained by the fact that China and Norway and those areas definitely are actually not as diverse as other places in the world. But if you go, for example, North Central Africa, there's like 8.6 million residents that belong to more than 100 ethnic groups. Or Togo, that's home to 37 tribal groups that speak one of like 39 languages and share. Like there's just like this is measured and.
Well, I think that's kind of a ridiculous way to look at it. These people have been there for their entire lives, right? Their entire history. They've been in those countries, and I don't think that's a real way to measure diversity. To say, oh, they speak a bunch of different languages within it, because you're looking at Africa's fairly geographical borders were mostly defined by Europeans, right. I think, right? So to call them a diverse country because they have a bunch of different tribes, I just don't see that as being a very good measure of diversity in the modern world, anyways.
I'm not.
But if you go to the U.S., you can find, one measure of diversity is food, right? I mean, like a culture is defined partly by its food, right? And you can find any kind of food anywhere in the United States. Now you can say maybe that's not a big deal, but I think that does add to the benefits that you get in the United States. So we can move on to the next.
I do want to kind of hang on to this for a second, because I kind of think that your interpretation or definition of diversity is lacking. It's a little too like anecdotal and for your like kind of subjective, in other words. Like if I think it's absolutely fair to, whether it's tribal groups or countries or cities, like the differences in culture is what create diversity. So the more different cultures you have in any particular place would kind of determine whether or not that place is diverse. And again, it's not that we don't have diversity here. We do. We have, people from all over the world, immigrants from all over the world that come to the United States. And I mean, I go to one of the most diverse, or went to one of the most diverse universities in the country. So like, I totally like see that, and I'm aware of that, and it's there and it's great. But again, just looking at numbers like that are, assessed nation or internationally, we can just see that it's not the case that we're the most diverse. We don't have the most variety of cultures and differences and experiences and languages and food, that doesn't exist the most in the United States.
Which university is that, by the way?
Yeah, Cal State Northridge.
Just a question.
California.
Okay. So yeah, California is obviously very diverse as well. And again, I'm not saying diversity is always a strength. In many cases, it's not. But having the ability to, hey, I would like, some kind of food or learn a different language or whatever, that's available in the United States at higher levels than just about any country in the world, including those African nations that you mentioned. Like if you want to go find, they might have different tribes, but you can look at Afghanistan as different tribes too. And I don't think people would say Afghanistan is a great country.
First of all, it's not a matter of determining whether or not the diversity has been good for the country. It's just whether or not it is diverse. And also, it's not limited to tribes. It's just an example of why, there is so many different cultures in certain areas of the world, much more than here. And that was just an example of Africa. Canada is also listed as being more diverse than the United States. So again, it's just facts kind of reviewing the population, of each individual country, and just the numbers show we're not the most diverse.
Well, in terms of benefits from diversity, so if we're looking at greatest country and we're saying it's diverse, on some measures, maybe we're not the diverse because, again, okay, so we don't have different tribes, but in some ways we do, right? They just happen to speak the same language, which is actually a benefit. If you get diversity within a single language, that's actually a good thing, that everybody speaks the same language. So again, the United States used to be a melting pot. You get people from all over the world. They get their cultures. They come and they become American, right? You can actually be American. You can never be French or Greek or something by traveling there. And you cannot really become, like, the French people will never, I don't think they'll ever accept you as a Frenchman or a French woman or something, right? If you're not born French, if you're not actually French. So that's something very unique to America.
To be fair,
as
I
far
don't
as
think, like, first of all, I think your point is really anecdotal. I think that there are probably cases where that, like, it goes both ways, right? Some people are very accepting of people who become, French citizens or British citizens, German, whatever. And at the same time, I mean, you look at America, there's so many citizens from, that come from immigrant families or different backgrounds that are very much not accepted at all as Americans, and we see that all the time. Like, that's, just the discrimination or racism or the hate speech that we do get to hear, right? Because we're not banning it. Like, we can hear that there's definitely people in the United States that are not accepting of diversity.
Well, there's people, and there are people, a small minority, very, very small minority, that don't accept them or don't want them here. But that doesn't mean that they actually don't come and that they're not actually Americans. So, I mean, you come to the United States and you can be a citizen very easily, right? Relatively so. I mean, 1 million people a year versus the number of people that come into other countries. Now, you've got a little bit of change in Europe, but, Europe's paying the price.
Right,
but
we're also, kind of trying to make that more.
And so,
to become a U.S. citizen.
U.S. or?
You wouldn't say that that's like the rhetoric of the United States right now? It's
no, of course not.
Okay.
No, I think
All
it's
right.
ridiculous.
Well,
No. So I think that's the leftist media says that, but it's not true at all. I mean, again, you look at the people that have come to the
right, but
United
it's not
States,
the
it goes up and up
I
and up.
guess what I'm saying, it's not the
And
leftist media saying, we're gonna tighten up or like make it harder for people from Muslim countries to come to the United States. Like that's not the leftist media saying that. That's the administration, right? It's like there are certain areas in which we are, or certain countries or certain people for whom we are trying to make it more difficult for them to become citizens.
well, yes, well, yes, violent countries that have lots of terrorists and have a lot of problems with.
Except for the one that
So
like
it's
was
basically just
supposedly
vetting.
responsible for 9/11.
But yeah, but that was several presidents that have said that. So, but there's nothing
right, right.
nothing new there,
and I'm
right?
not saying that it's new. I'm just
Nothing new under
yeah.
this.
I think
He's saying reducing illegal immigration, yes, but that's another thing, and I think that's a good thing as well. But let me say the world took a vote and they voted the United States as the
did
greatest
they
country
wait?
on
What?
earth,
What
right?
vote?
So
where can I find that result?
so if you go around the world and you ask people where they would like to go, historically, down for the last several hundred years, really, well, you can say probably 200 years, they've tried to make it to the U.S., right?
I don't know if I agree with that. Like, yeah,
The
I don't know that I
majority of
agree with that.
people.
I don't think the majority of people globally want to come to the United States.
Oh, I disagree. And the fact that we have 1 million legal immigrants to the United States says that there are vast numbers of people out there that want to come to the United States. You look at Mexico, just Mexico, right? Or Central America. They risk their lives going through Mexico because it is an enormous crime to illegally immigrate to Mexico. You'll spend 10 years in a dungeon somewhere, maybe never seen again, right?
Right. Well,
they do it though, which shows the hypocrisy. But on the other hand, never mind about the hypocrisy of Mexico. But the fact that they will risk their lives to come to the United States, smuggled in crates, right, from Asia, they'll pack them in crates like makeup kits or something, and they'll risk their lives.
Well, I do,
and
I do want to address at least two of those claims, right? Because I think, first of all, they're both just kind of your opinion. Well, hold on. Let me take that back. It is true that like Mexican citizens go through a lot and will risk a lot to come to the United States. First of all, it's right below us, right? So it's geographically very, very close. And there's the drug war in Mexico is just it's kind of the reason, right, that they're willing to risk their lives to do that, because things are so bad there that it's refuge, right? They're looking for a safer place to live. So in that case, in that scenario, because of the conditions of Mexico right now, I'll concede that for them it might be a good option for them to come. I don't know as much about people being shipped in boxes from China. I would say that if you like provide that evidence for me of that happening in that high numbers or whatever, then we can talk about that. But
well, it's not just the drug war; it's the economy as a whole. That the United States has long been considered the land of opportunity, right? Because of the relative economic freedom and the ability to actually come here, versus a lot of other countries with. And again, we're like 15th on the economic freedom index, but historically, we used to be right there at the top. It used to be very easy to come here with nothing and make a fortune. And you look at the billionaires, the 400 billionaires in the United States, and something like 250, 300 of them are self-made. There's so again, that kind of goes to income mobility in the United States is very high. You can be rich, you can be poor, and you can become something like Ben Carson or Justice Clarence Thomas, or my favorite economists, Walter Williams and Thomas Sowell. These are people who grew up in the projects and have really made it to the top of their fields, in fact. And that's something you can do. Yes, you can do that in some other countries, but it's very difficult. It's much easier to do it in the United States. And it's possible to be super rich in the United States, to come from nothing and be super rich. And it, it does happen.
I'll say it definitely does happen. And the United States really, really likes to like play up those, isolated cases of people making it really big from like rags to riches. But in reality, that rags to riches story, the actual statistic is a 1% chance of children coming from low income families have a 1% chance of making that kind of leap. And so the United States.
Well, that's an enormous.
Right. So I'm just starting.
I mean, it's reasonable.
Yeah. I'm just starting with like your first kind of example of like, coming here. No,
I'm just saying it's possible. And it does happen.
I'm not arguing it's not possible. It is possible and it does happen, but it doesn't happen. It's not social mobility, that ability to move economically in a country is not the best in the United States. In fact, it's gotten worse. And I think you said there's nowhere else in the United States. There's, let's see. So our social mobility is lower than in France, Germany, Sweden, Canada, Finland, Norway, and Denmark. So those are all places where people can go, from a poor economic condition, whether you were born there or you're, go migrate there, like you can go and make a better life for yourself. And I know that's the story we like to play up in the United States. Yourself up by your bootstraps and, make it at the top. You just have to work hard enough. That's just not the case. In fact, like most people's incomes throughout their adult lives is predicted by their parents' income, right? Like that's a fairly good indicator of what the person will make. And it's not, again, I'm not saying that that's like 100% every single time you'll be making what your parents make. It's just statistically we see that moving up economically in the United States is consistent with parents' earnings. And in the United States, we have disproportionately impoverished, minorities and I mean, even with the white population in the United States, there's a huge portion of the population that lives in poverty, and for them to overcome that is not. The chances of them doing that is just not as great in the United States as it would be somewhere else, like those other countries that I named.
Well, let me just name the countries that are listed above us: the UK, Italy, which Italy's a rather economic basket case. Chile, which yes, Chile is one of the great countries on earth, but again, I would say there's many other areas in which the United States is better. And Slovenia, like who moves to Slovenia, right? These are countries that people generally do not move to. People come to the United States because they see a great deal of other benefits that come to them.
I think they hope for a great deal of other benefits. I think that's true. I don't think that reality manifests itself for them.
Well, actually, it does, because if you look at immigrants, the immigrants, specifically immigrants in the United States, have an extremely high probability of getting wealthy or making money. The average income of Asians, which mostly is immigrants, is something like 69,000. The average income of so-called white is like 50,000, right? So you look at so-called privilege or something, it's immigrant privilege in the United States. And yes, they're self-selective, but that's not really important. The fact is that if you immigrate to the US with nothing, you have a good chance of becoming relatively wealthy. A lot of people, in fact, come to the United States because, and that's another thing, is people come to the United States and they leave Europe because they want to be wealthy. They have a good business idea. So moving on to another thing.
I just want to real quick before you do. I do want to say that, just because your final point there was just kind of claiming that you can come from nothing and make it. And I just want to kind of reinforce this notion that that's a claim that I haven't still gotten any backup from you when I've kind of provided.
Well, I'm saying it's happened.
Right, but isolated instances don't mean that it is possible for everybody.
Well, it means it's possible.
Yeah, but it's possible. But at that point, it's possible for everybody anywhere in the world, or like anywhere in the free world. in the free world,
No,
right?
it's not.
Like,
Well, I would disagree because tax rates in Europe and the other regulations in Europe disincentivize
but if
wealth
that were
building,
true,
right?
then why is there more social mobility in some of those other countries than in?
Well, that's a first of all, Bob Murphy of Contra Krugman, they took that up, and I'm gonna go find that episode and I'll post it. But they take that on, they look at the actual numbers, and I'll just defer to him. Bob Murphy's he's an Austrian economist, Mises Institute, Texas. He works at Texas Tech, so great. I love the guy. He's written several books. In fact, I had his book on the debate I did last night on medical care. So he's with energy and medicine. The other thing I was going to say is that a lot of people come to the U.S. because they have an idea in another country and they want to be rich, and so they come to the U.S. with their brilliant idea, with their business, and they come to the U.S. where they can actually do the business, where they can actually open the business. John Stossel had a really great episode on this years ago. About he mentioned France as one example of the Minitel, right? Which is the high-tech computer at one time, and then they just never got beyond that. They made it in different colors, but there was a woman that left France because she could not open her business in France, and she came to Silicon Valley. So I would say, as far as the U.S., virtually all the technology, innovation, businesses, all these things come from the United States. The world's largest companies are in the United States. The most visited websites are in the United States. The internet itself comes from the United States. And so I just I'd also say the variety and choice, United States, the medical benefits that the world gets in medicine come from the United States, whether it's drugs or innovation or technology, the MRI machine, things like this, right? All these things come from the United States. And we can argue about medical care, but I would say the U.S. has the best medical system in the world, and a lot of people prove that because they would rather come to the U.S. and pay for it out of their pocket than get it free, so-called free if they can find it where they live, right? And that includes
so let me just start
Canada.
Off with this definition of innovation. Again, yes, we're great at innovation. We've produced a lot of things. Again, if you're looking relative to other parts of the world, first ranking in innovation is Switzerland, right? They dominate research, infrastructure, institutions, market, business sophistication, and a commitment to knowledge and creativity. If at any point you want links to this information, by the way, let me know. But I'm trying to find out. We rank 4th. Okay, so again, it's not that we're not great or good, but the United States is definitely not leading globally in innovation, despite the fact that, you can point to anything, right? Like you can point to Apple and be like, oh my gosh, we have Apple, so we're the best in the world. But again, if you're looking kind of assessing relative to what other countries are producing, the rate at which they're producing, the rate at which they're incentivizing their citizens to produce, like that kind of thing, if that's what you're looking at, we don't rank at the top. We just don't. We rank at the top, but not first.
What does Switzerland do, though? But what does Switzerland do? Like, what comes out of Switzerland that people actually consume? Swatch. And I know Switzerland is actually a very economically free country. And obviously, they're a very tiny country. So that's why you can be freer. But, if we were to list companies and things that we actually use on an everyday basis, things that make our lives better. I get in my car and it's a Japanese design car, but it's probably made in the United States. And I know the car was invented by Mercedes-Benz, but the modern car was really invented by Henry Ford in the United States, right? The fact that you can actually buy a car is because of the United States. And I know some people today don't really care, but I think, again, if we're talking about greatness of a country, the U.S. is large, it's open, and the car, as far as freedom, you ask his 15-year-old, what's freedom to you? Or actually ask him what a car is to you, and he's freedom. Car is freedom, right? I can get in my car and I can go wherever the heck I want,
Sure.
anytime I
And your
want, right?
Japanese car, you can get it
And so I think that
anytime you
is one of the,
want. um,
yeah. Well, I had a Mustang before, right? My wife bugged me and bugged me and bugged me to get a new car. So,
um,
so I kind of,
so again, I guess, so if we're looking at measuring, it kind of seems like you're measuring the success of innovation based on what we use the most. And I honestly couldn't tell you, whether or not everything that that I think is the most useful in society has been produced or innovated in America versus other countries. Like, I'm not entirely sure where everything originated, so I couldn't tell you. But based on reviews that people do or studies that are conducted. Um, for example, Switzerland, US, they have, let's see, a local bank, UBS, sorry, is now using virtual reality to project investment portfolios to its clients. So these are significant innovations that are being produced and that are being put out there. And its ability to turn innovative thinking into lucrative projects is higher in Switzerland. So even if we had the capability in the United States, which we do obviously, because we do have a lot of innovation, like you said, Silicon Valley, as a place to have people present their projects and work on them and succeed and all that, put them out there. But if we had, for example, the same turnover or that incentive
well, I would say
that incentive to turn these ideas and these projects into actual successful businesses and put them into practice out in society, Switzerland is better at doing that. So if we had, for example, that quality in the United States, then we might be ranked differently in innovation.
well, questionable. But I would also point out the fact that, this platform, and I'm sure the computer you're using, I know the computer I'm using, all of these things were designed and built in the United States. The computer itself was, right, an American invention for the most part. So we've got 3 minutes left. So I don't know if you want to do closing. So I'll go ahead and do do you want to do a ABA type thing? I'll close, you close, and then we can rebut or something.
Yeah, I'll follow your lead. I mean, that's my first.
Okay. So this was an open discussion type. I just like these open discussion rather than I'm going to throw my points up there and then click over. So I would say, as far as freedom of speech and freedom of religion, I think are some of the most important freedoms that there are out there. And the U.S. is vastly, I think, greater than any other country. It's on top as far as your freedom to practice your religion and not only believe, but actually practice. And your freedom of speech, which means that you're free to think as you wish. So, we don't have the thought crimes that countries all around the world have. Your freedom of movement, that comes from the cars and other things. Your freedom of access to basically almost anything that you could imagine in the United States. Your freedom to go out and buy whatever you want. That's one of the great things I really enjoy when I come back to the US is I can go to the store and I can get the enormous variety of things that I would like. Grocery stores have an average of something like 150,000 different products, right? So the U.S., the income and versus cost of living has the best ratio in the United States. People live what I think is the best, anyways. They live the highest level of, I guess, living in the U.S. We have large houses, large cars, large roads, and all of that. Yes, it accumulates and it usually turns into a large gut, but we are overweight. But so the Americans are overweight because we are so prosperous. So I think, yes, it's a bad outcome, but it shows the prosperity of the United States. So I think U.S. overall, the U.S. is the best country when you add everything up. So there are certain here and there.
Sorry. Okay, so we talked about political speech, and I said that your burden would pretty much have to come down to why our freedom of speech and not banning hate speech is better than the other countries that have the same thing, and you weren't really able to prove that. Then we talked about diversity, social mobility, and innovation, all of which I provided evidence in which we are not the highest ranking in the world by any means in any of those areas. So while I appreciate your American pride, I just don't think that statistically, facts and numbers back up the fact that the USA is the greatest country on earth, at least in those categories. Thanks.
All right, and no,